but it was reality.
How many times did you get denied parole before you actually got parole?
Twice. But I was in a unique situation because it became a point in my incarceration that I wanted to educate myself. So early on, I got my GED. Then I eventually got an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree. So
while you was in prison?
While I was in prison. So that kind of changed my mentality. It changed my, like.
How you doing? My name is Cripple3030, and I'm here with my guest, Mary E. Buser. She's the award-winning author for the award-winning book called Lockdown on Rikers. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Nice to be here.
Well, previously I had interviewed you before on my show before. We spoke about about the things that you wrote in the book. We spoke about different events that occurred during your employment. Mm-hmm. But now we have new viewers, so maybe you could just
Sure.
describe what your events are and what you worked as.
Yes, well, I started off, Lockdown on Rikers is the story of my journey on Rikers Island. I started off as an idealistic intern who wanted to help people, and I worked in the women's jail, and as some people know, but not everyone, Rikers is a complex of many jails. When I was there were 10. One of them was for women. And I started off working with these women, working with mothers in the nursery, and I had very high hopes of getting to know them, of helping them, so that they might find a better path for themselves and not return to Rikers Island. And my first year, that internship, it went really great. I loved it. It's not for everyone, but it was for me. And then I returned. And this time I was assigned to one of the men's jails, a maximum security men's jail called GMDC. And I worked as a therapist there for the next 3 years or so. And things started to change for me because I started to become much more aware of the system, how it impacts people, of the brutality on the island. A lot of things were starting to disturb me. And I still believed in my work and the value of meeting with these guys one-on-one and in groups, trying to help them. But there was great sadness and despair there.
So when you first started your job, right?
Yes.
You was looking at things more that you can bring something to the facility that you was working in, right? Like something positive?
Definitely. Definitely.
But then now you're saying that towards this time,
right,
like you started seeing that you can't really assist them as much as you thought.
I definitely changed. I was idealistic in the beginning, and then as I started to become aware, I started to feel things more and more futile. Like, did it really matter what I was doing? That I was bringing somebody peace of mind for, 15 minutes, but the overall picture was so bad. And then what happened was I was promoted to an assistant chief of mental health, and my final post on Rikers, I was the acting chief in charge of the 500-cell solitary confinement unit.
So
and that was it for me.
At what point, if you can remember,
mm-hmm,
at what point is it that you started telling yourself that I can't really bring what I thought I could bring?
It was a progression. It was like a balance that was starting to tip. Specifically, people would come, I think of an example, a guy came and he had been arrested. He was in a motorcycle accident, and he was a really nice guy. And that was a big surprise for me and for people that I knew about. The inmates on Rikers were very much everyday people, but there were also people who did not have money. And I started to see that the role that money plays in all of this. And what you believe at the beginning, that it's all about truth and justice, I started to discover was kind of something that is a motto. It's nice, but the way things play out has nothing to do with that at all. And this guy who was in the motorcycle accident, someone was killed. And the police said it was an accident. Someone came out from between two buses, no previous record, but they were charging him with vehicular manslaughter. And the bail was, I forget how much it was, but it was a few $1,000s,
Right.
and he didn't have it. And I kept saying to him, you know, this is an accident. You have to hang on for your day in court, and then discovering that your day in court could be years and years.
Right.
And in the meantime, you have to survive Rikers Island. And that in the end, he copped out to whatever they gave him. And I saw people doing that one by one. Maybe their charges weren't as bad, or, you know, as what they did, what they were being charged with. Maybe if they were on the outside, it could have been knocked down to a misdemeanor. But I started to see the disadvantage if you did not have money for bail, fighting your case on Rikers versus fighting it from home.
Was there a point in time when you thought to yourself, well, if as long as he abides by the law and he goes to and fights his case, he'll be okay, because he, you know, it was just an accident. They won't give him a lot of time, or they won't give him any time if if he's innocent. Right. Did you ever feel that way?
Yes, I believed that in the beginning. I really did. But then I started to see, because I was working with him, and I told him, I'm going to see you through this. If we have to meet every day, I want to give you the moral support. But I began to see that he could never reach his lawyer. The phones are always broken. All the little things that add up to make it your desire to see justice practically impossible.
Right.
Visiting. He really depended on visits from his girlfriend. That was everything to him. Well, she got really hassled in the visit house and so mistreated, like so many of the visitors, that she said, I'm sorry, I love you, but I'm never coming back to Rikers Island.
And that was something that would keep somebody stable, right? In that type of situation.
Absolutely.
It keeps the mind more focused on what he has to do. He has to fight his case. He has to go to court. He has to stay out of trouble.
Yes. The connections with family, with loved ones, are so important, because it's a scary place to be. You're alone. You don't know what your future is. So having those connections is very calming. I would see people who had visits much calmer afterwards than beforehand, but they made the visitors, they made it hell for visitors for, quote, security reasons. So people would become very upset then when their loved ones are not coming back.
Right.
Now they have to try to get on the phone, and maybe the gangs control the phones, and half of them don't work. And you start to feel more and more isolated. You can't reach your lawyer. And there is no definite date for your trial. It could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. So you have to live in this limbo state. But all the while they're saying, just say you did it,
Right.
and you can go home for time served.
So now,
But you're going to take now the
You're
the
being
charge.
in the mental health field, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can that affect a person
Oh my God, it's
going through all
devastating.
of that?
Devastating. People would become so depressed. They would all start off with, you know, I'm going to fight my case. This isn't right. And in the beginning, I was like, yes, don't ever say you did something that you didn't do.
Right.
But in the end, they would say, after I've been doing this for a few years, they'd come in and say, I'm going to fight this case. And I didn't say much, because I knew the odds, the odds were so stacked against you.
Can it make somebody who's innocent
Mm-hmm.
actually consider pleading guilty?
All the time. All the time.
So if they went through them type of traumas, you've only mentioned just a few of the things
Yes.
that they can go through in there.
Yeah.
For example, you probably have witnessed like the abuse that the guards do to the prisoners.
Absolutely.
They call them, I believe, I'm not sure if you've heard of the terms, but they have the suave episodes when they use the shampoo on the prisoners, you know, put it in their rectal area and stuff like that. You know, you have different things that I've heard of before, and you know, I've actually been around. But if you go through things like that, if a person is innocent and he gets thrown in that type of situation,
Right.
I guess my question is, what are the odds that a person that's innocent, going through all of that, let's say going for about a year or two fighting this case,
Right.
and he loses his family because his family stops coming to visit him, stops writing him, because of all the abuses that they go through and the stress and the harassments. And then on top of that, they can't hear from him. He can't talk to nobody because he has trouble getting on the phone. Maybe he has fights in prison because they're robbing him for his stuff. You know, they're beating him down. After a year or two, what are the odds that all of a sudden he could say, you know what, I'm willing to take 3, 5 years, 6 years for whatever they charge me with, even though he's innocent.
The odds are very good that he will, because it becomes a question now of survival. And the idea of truth and justice takes a back seat, because you want to get out of here alive. And you've been beaten up physically, you've been beaten up mentally. I mean, that's what made Khalif Browder so remarkable, because this is the classic case where he was charged with swiping a backpack, and he refused to take the plea offer, because that's what they do. It's just a big arm twist. They know you can't afford the bail, so just say you did it, and he refused to say he did it. He was beaten badly. He was thrown into solitary confinement, but he refused to back down, and I don't know what was inside him that he was able to do that, but I think, as most people know, it cost him his life, because he left Rikers Island. They finally dropped the charges when he wouldn't give in. Just a shattered, destroyed person who had been a normal 16-year-old kid when he went in, and he just couldn't get past it, and as I think most people know, he killed himself. But most people are going to perhaps be a little more practical, realize that the odds are, it's stacked against them. They can't win. This day in court thing is a hoax, and they're going to say, uncle.
And the system actually does whatever they can to keep reminding the person of that. Like, you have no way to win this, right? Like, when you go to court, they remind you every morning. When you go to court, what they do, they call you by a number. Right? They don't want you to say what's your name. They want you to say what's your number, right? So it's like they wipe your identity out. Then they take you to court, and when you go to court, if you're talking to the guards, whether you're talking to the lawyer, even sometimes your own lawyer, they automatically assume that you're guilty.
Of course.
So when they do the interviews on you, the lawyer is automatically in his mind, he's thinking that you're guilty.
He's thinking, what kind of a deal can I get? It's all deal making. That's what I learned, and that's what all the guys on Rikers told me. And they said that your lawyer and the prosecutor, as they put it, they're all in bed together. I'll give you this, you give me a break on that. It's deal making. It's not what you see on Law and Order.
So now, what did that do to you for your view of what was going on?
Well, I couldn't believe it, and it was taking a toll on me, because I come from a middle-class family, and I would visit my family, for holidays, whatever, and I would try to tell them. And basically, the outside world thinks it's what you see on TV, and they couldn't believe it. They couldn't accept it. And I said, I'm telling you, this is how it goes. People just kind of turned off. I knew I could hear the whispers, bleeding heart, and just this liberal. And I'm like, it really has nothing to do with, political persuasion. This is human rights. These are big lies that everyone is entitled to their day in court. Then I started doing some research, and I learned that, in the borough of Manhattan alone, and the numbers are in my book exactly, but it's something like 100,000 charges a year. It's more than that, but let's just say that's for argument's sake. The capacity of courtrooms, lawyers, judges, is to try maybe 2,500. They don't have the capacity to try every single case. So you can try 2,000, while the other 98,000 might say they want their day in court, but then you become a pain in the neck if you keep pushing it. And what they want you to do is take the cop out. Here's a good deal. I'll get you this deal.
And sweep you under the rug.
Yes. And people don't realize they want to get out of jail, which is understandable. They want to get out. They want to get on with their lives. But what they don't understand is what it means to accept a felony, what it means for the rest of your life. And I would try to explain that to people. Like, most people that I worked with already had felonies, but some did not. And I would say it's so important that you don't cop out to this, that you don't take that felony, because this will follow you for the rest of your life.
Did you ever share those viewpoints with staff, with like your fellow co-workers, the people you were working with?
Yeah, we all knew.
How you was changing your views, like, understanding that the system was kind of stacked against, the inmates?
I think that everyone was aware of it, in the same way that everyone was aware of the brutality. I mean, that was another area that was very hard for me to, where I felt very helpless. So we would talk a lot. I had a good team when I was at GMDC.
Right.
We were a very cohesive team, and we would talk about, you know, the things, people coming to our sessions with their teeth punched out or black eyes and telling us what happened. And, you know, we were like, what do we do? What do we
Right.
do? You know, we have to do something. And this is another area where I did become very disillusioned, because in the beginning, I knew things were happening that shouldn't have been, but I assumed that it was isolated. I thought one or two, you know, I remember once I was in a stairwell with some nurses coming down. We were going to the mental observation unit, and there was a little window there, and all of a sudden the CO shuts the door and tells us, stay behind the door. But we could see through the window. And they're bringing some guy down the hall, and the officers are in riot gear, and he has his hands interlaced on his head, and they walk. So they still are holding us there, and like a few minutes later, they come back, and the door swing where we are open, and now the COs are propping him up. He's just bloody, moaning, and his sneakers, the clinic was up the stairs. And that was the closest I came to actually seeing something like that. I mean, they'd brought him to the receiving room, which is where a lot of this stuff took place.
Right.
But the hard part for me, or for all of us, was someone would tell you what happened to them, and I would say, we're going to report this. And they would say, every single one of them would say, can you guess what they might say?
It's not going to help.
No, they would say, they'd be terrified, don't, because if you do, next time they will kill me.
Oh, the inmate would tell you that.
Yes.
So now, did you ever find any staff, like not just mental health staff, but even correction officer staff, maybe counselors, even the superintendent
Right.
or anybody who would say, thank you for telling me the information and actually follow up?
No, because who you're going to follow, who are you going to tell? You tell the warden. You're going to get labeled a troublemaker. You're expected to work within this system. I remember one physician's assistant. He was in, they called it the Beacon, another one of the jails. He got transferred to GMDC, and he left the Beacon because he wrote, when he examined an inmate, he wrote up, who was badly injured, exactly what he thought as to why this injuries occurred. You're supposed to
Right.
not. And because he was honest to say he was beaten by the COs,
Right.
somehow they're not supposed to be reading the charts, but I learned they read them out all the time, so you have to be very careful what you wrote.
Right.
The warden told him, consider yourself, consider that you shouldn't consider yourself to feel safe in this jail anymore.
The warden told him that?
Yes.
So it indirectly it's like the warden was condoning it.
Well, yes.
At least the pressure from the staff to be quiet.
Yes, definitely.
Wow.
So what that meant was he had to be transferred out of that jail to another jail because he couldn't feel safe there. If people, there were reports, if civilians reported things as they were, honestly, tires would get slashed. You would get labeled as a troublemaker. And then if that happened, you see, if you're a civilian, you're behind bars too.
Right.
So anywhere you want to go, the door is locked.
Right.
You've got to bang, bang, bang.
You actually have to, that's what I wanted to clarify too. You actually have to depend on security staff
Yes.
because the correction officers is actually there to secure you too.
They are. But you don't get your own set of keys.
Right.
You are depending on them. And if you get a name as a problem person, a loudmouth, whatever, well, the doors don't open.
Right. And then if, and actually the warden is their boss.
Yes.
So he would be the person that you should be able to rely on to make sure you're safe while you're in the facility.
Yes. And I'm sure the warden would be very civilized in taking this information from you and maybe pass it down. But there's a big difference between the higher ranking and the rank and file COs.
But how safe did you feel after you heard that story where the physician's assistant actually wrote, was honest, and that the warden himself went to him and said, you should consider yourself unsafe in this facility? How safe did you feel after that?
That's a very good question. I think it was a warning that all of us felt, and there were hundreds of us between medical, mental health, pharmacy, staff in all of these jails. We all knew there was this undercurrent of danger for us, that if you're a little too loud, a little too rock the boat, don't consider yourself safe here. And everybody kind of knew that.
Did you ever have an instance where you seen an inmate in such a bad situation that you told yourself, okay, I understand the dangers that are against me, but I need to do something to help him? Maybe he was the victim of an assault or something like that, where you said, well, it doesn't matter what's going to happen to me, but I have to go tell somebody, I have to do something to help him. Did you ever find yourself in that kind of situation?
Yeah, but it wasn't my well-being that I was concerned about. My concern was putting him in a worse situation, putting someone in greater danger. That was the danger there. Like, for example, on the mental observation unit at GMDC, we had a guy who was brought in they were always transferring people jail to jail. He came in because he had been beaten by COs in another jail, and his arm was all stitched up and in a sling, whatever. And I learned about this because the next day the guys who were on that dorm, who I met with to go over their treatment, one by one told me, and they were terrified, that what happened was a bunch of COs came in and they said, who's the guy? Oh, after he'd been beaten up, he filed a complaint. They came in and they said, who's the guy that complained about what happened elsewhere? And it was obvious, the guy with the sling.
Right.
And they cornered him and they had him on the ground and they stomped him, and they stomped out all the stitches in his arm, just a pulp, everything that had been fixed at the hospital.
So they reopened it back up?
Yeah.
Pretty much?
Oh, yeah. And he had to be hospitalized again.
Wow.
And then when he came back, I met with him, and I just said to him, are you okay for what happened? He goes, oh, nothing happened. And I said, well, I can't say who told me that, and I'm concerned about you. He said, oh, no, I'm fine. The COs, they're a great bunch of guys. That's what he said. And I knew,
but it was obvious to you that something had happened. His injuries was open again.
Yeah.
He was hurt all over again.
Yeah, but I mean, he'd been brutally beaten twice, and I'm sure his fear was, A, he didn't want to go through it again, and B, they might kill him next time.
So, in other words, they achieved their goal, which was to traumatize him enough to shut him up.
Yes, they did. So for me, the predicament was not so much putting myself in danger, but am I going to put you in danger? Right. You've been beaten up. Now, and you're begging me to say nothing, and there's confidentiality.
Right.
I can't ignore, I have to respect your wishes, even though I'm like, damn it, I want to get justice for you. But A, I have to abide by confidentiality, and B, who am I to say that something worse can happen to you because I opened my mouth?
Did you ever come across anybody on the staff, correctional or civilian or whatever, that said, Mrs. Buser, I understand what you're feeling. I'm willing to stick my neck out with you. I'm willing to speak up about what's going on. Did you ever come across anybody who was willing to do that?
No, because who do you speak up to? Who do you tell?
Normally they will go to the warden, which is the same one that told the PA that
I sometimes thought of calling the police, but I thought, well, they're just going to call up the warden and say, what's going on? The warden's going to say.
The inmates, I know that the inmates normally, when they're trying to follow up like on complaints, they go to the warden. If they can't reach the warden, they shoot out to the commissioner or to the mayor or to the governor.
And some of them are okay for doing that. There are no repercussions.
Well, No, not all the time.
Right.
Because now remember, in order for you to communicate with the governor and the mayor, you have to actually write a letter,
Right.
right? So the mail system is ran by the correctional officers.
Right.
So if they see a letter that's going to the mayor and to the governor, are they actually, that's like saying, you're here, I'm willing to let you tell on me. Right. Here, boss, take this, and so you can know what I'm doing
Stamp
to these
it
guys.
for me, would you?
Yeah, right? So they don't normally let it happen.
Yeah.
So now, but this is, the reason I asked you that question is actually because I spoke to a few staff that worked at Rikers Island or, you know, in different facilities up north, upstate, which is the state facilities. And a lot of their arguments is not everybody's a bad apple. Not everybody, you know, is actually condones what goes on.
Right.
But then none of them can tell me that they know, they don't have to give me a name, but none of them can tell me of at least one or two people that said, I'm willing to stick my neck out. It doesn't matter. This is going on around me. I hate this. I'm going to stick my neck out, and I'm going to speak what I've actually saw.
Here's what we would do. This is one thing we would do. On the other side of the bridge, there are no payphones anymore, but there were payphones.
Right.
The Board of Correction of New York City is the oversight agency. They're the ones who are supposed to investigate brutality. We would call them anonymously and say, this or that happened, and they would take notes and say they would investigate. So we would do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But see, like, you and the fellow staff members that actually did that was actually a rare bunch. That's what I'm really trying to pinpoint, because, like I said, my discussions with a lot of other staff and a lot of people that have family that work there and stuff and so on and so forth, is that no matter how much that you disagree with what goes on, if you are not in a position where you can actually do something about it, but yet you continue to go along with it, you're just as bad as they are.
Well, here's the thing. You're also doing a lot of good. You're doing a hell of a lot of good. The person who has no one to talk to, who's terrified, who's depressed and going to kill themselves. You know, I looked everybody in the eye, shook their hands, listened with my whole heart. So there's terrible things happening, but not all the time. But all the time you're meeting with people trying to provide a lifeline for one of the most difficult things someone could go through in their life. So if you make a lot of noise, you can do that, but you're not going to work there anymore. So you're like, for me, that
so you got to try to find
that was the balance.
That
yeah, that was
Right.
what disturbed me. Like, okay, what do I do? Really blow the whistle? But what about this guy that I'm working with who,
Right.
you know, or these 10 guys that I have in a group, and this guy just found out he has AIDS, and you're doing really good stuff at the same time. And also, there was one thing that helped us somewhat was the fact that just the civilian presence in the jails, we felt, sort of inhibited the violence because they did not want us to see it. So
Right.
we were kind of a little bit of a check on their behavior just by walking the halls with them and being there with them. They knew there was another eye in there.
Did you ever think to yourself of how much danger you were putting yourself in when you was doing? Because honestly speaking, it's just obvious, you know, to anybody. It's common sense. If I'm trying to hurt somebody, which is what the guards was trying to do to the inmates,
Right.
And here comes Mrs. Buser and actually talks to them, and actually consoles them and keeps them stable, that's actually contrary to what I'm trying to do. So it's like you're putting yourself in like extreme danger, because remember, I'm the one, if I'm a guard,
Right.
I'm the one that's supposed to be making sure you're safe. So did you ever think to yourself how much danger you was putting yourself in? Did that ever came into your mind while you're there?
You're walking a fine line in there. You're walking a very fine line. You have to be very careful. But I will say this, when you said, did anyone ever speak out? I couldn't while I was in there, because you're not going to work there anymore.
Right.
And it's like, is all the good that I'm doing, you know. Ultimately, I came to feel that the scales had completely flipped. There was nothing left in me to give, and all I saw now was the bad. But I was determined once I got out of there, that's what motivated me to write a book,
Right.
and blow the whistle big time. From within, I couldn't, but when I got out, I did.
And I'm pretty sure, like, from the different interviews that I've seen and me reading the book itself, I've noticed that you've networked with, like, so many people
Yeah.
that you can actually speak to that makes a difference. Because even if you speak to just your regular Joe, average Joe that walks down the street, you're opening up you're opening up their eyes to actually what's going on inside.
Yes.
Because out here, everybody thinks, oh no, the laws are saying that they're not supposed to do that, so that doesn't happen in there.
Right.
But you're here as evidence that yes, it does happen. I'm telling you, this is what happens. I witnessed it.
Yeah.
So it actually opens up everybody's eyes, which makes them want to investigate and makes them want to ask more questions.
Definitely. And I get the most gratification when I go to places like, I remember speaking to a women's group on Long Island, all these middle-class white ladies, very lovely people, and there had to be about 60 of them there, and I talked about my book, about my experiences, and jaws just dropped. You know, they couldn't believe it. And what they all said was, I didn't know. I didn't know. And I always felt like a score when someone said, I didn't know, but now they do. Because
Right.
you can't go back to not knowing anymore.
Right.
Now you know.
Now they have the images in their head.
The curtain has been pulled back.
Right.
And I think that's happening. We were just seeing a big groundswell with regard to mass incarceration in this country. And people are becoming aware in ways I never could have imagined. When I first wrote this book, after I left solitary confinement on Rikers, it took me about 2 years just to kind of recover from the experience and start to write. I'd never written a book before, but it took 10 years. No one was talking about Rikers Island. No one believed me with what, and I was like, did I imagine all of this?
They thought you were crazy.
Yeah, like, oh, we have
Yeah.
a wonderful system, and Giuliani cleaned up the streets, and it was a very hard sell. I got turned down at least 50 times. It was
Imagine that, a top mental health official, and everybody thought you were crazy.
well, they just didn't. Yeah, they just they didn't. They kind of, I got the
Everybody just
label
kept throwing
bleeding
up the wall.
heart. Yeah.
Yeah, they throw up the wall to throw up the obstacles so you can't be able to succeed at what you're trying to do.
Right, and just not believing it.
Right.
But then the New York Times got in there somehow, and they started articles about the brutality. And once that happened, that was a game changer, because it wasn't just me. And I thought, thank God, because nobody's believing me. And then once it started opening up and it just kept coming, then the book went. But
Right.
it was a very hard sell. No one believed this. People think that people have these ideas. That's where the bad people are, and thank God we're all safe there, and with no idea, first of all, of the humanity that exists. You know, I met some wonderful people who were incarcerated, who I'll never forget. Smart, creative, gentle souls, and just it's so much more complex than good and bad.
Right.
Yeah, it really is.
And honestly, it's an experience that nobody should have to go through.
No, I don't care what anybody has done. The way that people have been treated, I think there's a lot of changes on Rikers now, but just as you mentioned in the beginning, how dehumanizing numbers. My first day in the receiving room for the women, they were in these bullpens, and just that, seeing people in cages was very disturbing. But the COs just made no eye contact. They just said, 8 bodies in this pen, 10 bodies in this pen, counting. And I looked at my supervisor. It was my first day. I said, bodies? Bodies? Well, learn the lingo. That's property, bodies, book and case number.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of people,
Right.
humans, they didn't look at us like that. They don't look like inmates that way.
No, and once you dehumanize people, and they're not really human beings, they're a body, then you can get away with brutalizing and hurt, because they're not really human beings.
I guess that would be a way for a person to mentally justify to themselves that it's okay to commit them traumas.
I think so.
Like, it prepares them and say, okay, well, you know what? they're not really people anyway. They're just a piece of property.
That's, I agree. That's the way. And I wrote about it in the book, the police calling people skells, you know, just names for people. You can just do anything you want because they're not really people. And, you know, it all starts, I think, with dignity for every person, regardless of what you're charged with, you know, dignity.
Why, throughout your whole time working there, what was the worst, I guess the worst incident that you've ever witnessed yourself?
Well, it's hard to
There's like so many, right?
Probably the brutality.
Like just overall?
Yeah, and I remember towards the end there, just before I was promoted, I remember I was told, go to the infirmary. There's somebody in there, and I went in, and there was this man, and he was just huddled, shivering underneath this gray blanket, and you know, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he just was shivering and could barely speak, and his arm, he was like something wrong with it, and you know, I got him to talk, and what is your name, and this, you know, I'd like to just talk to you. Are you okay? And he told me that he'd been arrested, and there was some issue with the car service. All baloney, you know, I don't want to say baloney stuff, but it's not on the scale of what people think.
Right.
Something with the car service and the driver saying this and him saying that about payment, whatever. And anyway, he was brought into a station house and was given papers to sign. And he said, "No, I'm not signing that. That's not the way it happened."
Right.
And he said that they simply handcuffed him and put his hands behind him, and they took some kind of a broomstick, and he said, just started twisting, and he said, I was screaming. I said, "Could anyone hear you?" He said, "Yeah." Someone said, "Everything okay in there?" And the detective said, "Yeah, just doing a little paperwork." I mean, he was maimed. He'd come to Rikers from the hospital after surgery to try and reattach tendons.
Wow.
Yeah, and his just this strapping man in the prime of his life, now with a dead arm, and he just said, "My arm will never work again," you know. And he was tortured in a station house, and same thing. I said, "We're going to do something," and he was just like, "Oh my God, no." But he did reach a point, thank God, because I kept saying to him, "How about if you tell your lawyer?"
Right.
You know, it's not like a CO who was here. This is on the outside, a policeman who did this to you. And he finally agreed. He gave the case to, he told the lawyer who got another type of lawyer in there to take the case.
Right.
But what he went through, and just a very nice man.
Were the staff able to help him? Like, for example, did they give him the right medical attention? Did they make sure that he didn't go into population where they could actually take other inmates could take advantage of him from only having one functional arm?
I don't know. He was in the infirmary when I left, because right then I was promoted, and then I went to another jail called AMKC, and then to OBCC. And that's a weird thing about working in this type of a setting. Once you leave, you have no contact with the people. You might wonder how someone is doing, but you can't. The place is such high security. As civilians, you can't like bop from one jail to another. You have clearance for whatever jail you're assigned to. So you can't just go back to another jail. You have to be in the jail, in that jail. So I never really knew. But he's one of the people that, you know, since the book is out and all, that I met with hundreds of people, have never bumped into any of them in all of this time. But I remember his name, and I'm hoping at some point maybe I could track him down and see how
Who knows?
he's doing.
Maybe one day he'll see one of your interviews and he'll say, you know, let me contact Mrs. Buser. Let me see, you know, let me thank her for actually, you know, being there for me and speaking to me when it was going on. And actually, a lot of people don't understand that just a conversation to an inmate actually goes a long way.
Yes.
Because when you're incarcerated, like you have nobody to talk to, and you need to keep your mind focused because you have to fight your case, you have to stay out of trouble, you have to, you have to keep your mind grounded, and it's kind of hard to do that in there.
I think that's a really good point, because that's what, when I'd sit down with these guys again we'd have a booth, and it was, they would say, you can't talk to anybody in here, you can't trust anyone. So can you imagine having so much anxiety and fear that's inside of you, and no one, it's terrible. So I felt that I was doing something important to be able to tell me, what is it like for you? Who are you? Tell me about yourself, and to care. I remember one guy came in crying. He was referred. His brother was working on the outside at a McDonald's, and he was a stray bullet shot and killed. And this guy, and he was a tough gang member,
Right.
and he came in, and he was so upset, but he said, well, I guess I'll go back to my house. I said, no. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
I want you to stay here. You could be on the clinic count, you know
Right.
what that means.
Right.
And he just wept and wept, and he needed to grieve.
If not, that may have been like a time bomb later on.
Yeah. So I gave him a lot of time, and I had him come back the next day and got him access to a phone that worked, to talk to his family, because he just kept saying he was the good one. He was the
Right.
good one. The rest of us into all kinds of trouble, but
Right.
why did this happen? And so there were, just because people can be wounded and it's not their arm or their leg, the things we can't see, the intangibles, are just as real. Anxiety, despair, depression, fear, and need to be treated as well. And
So if you was to have one of these people that you helped before, if they was to be able to like talk to you today, and maybe call you on the phone, or maybe click onto your website or something, and say thank you, how would that make you feel?
well, that would make me feel pretty.
Would it make you feel like it was really worth it, right?
It would, but I felt then that they were saying thank you. I did.
In the best ways that they could.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Sometimes they would make me things out of little gum wrappers. I still have, those things I treasure. Little things that they would make out of whatever, scraps, whatever, and give it as a little present. A little boot made out of gum wrappers. I have a couple of those. I'll never part with those things.
So now, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, do you have maybe a social media or something where you would prefer that they contact you?
I have a website called marybuser.com. You could go there, and right there you'll see Twitter, Facebook, and everything if anybody did want to get in touch with me. Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that even though I asked you a lot of questions and you spoke about a lot of your experiences, I'm pretty sure even though they can catch a lot of them in your book, there's probably a lot of other things that you actually still have in your head and your experiences, and they might want to ask you some more questions. Maybe they'll call you for their own interviews and stuff.
That would be something. That would be amazing.
We got to keep spreading the word, right? That's the only way to keep doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Each person that you open their eyes is like another step further towards the goal of opening the eyes of everybody.
Yes, towards a complete reform to the whole criminal justice system. Yes, it has to change. It has to, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a lot of studies being done now on prisons in Germany and Finland and other Scandinavian countries where people are treated as human beings. They're given a decent place to sleep. They might have a little room. They can ride a bicycle. They can cook. They can be outdoors. It is so different. And the recidivism rate, people coming back, is so low compared to the United States, where you have these horrible prisons and these dogs walking down the hallways, and it's so scary.
Right.
I don't know how I don't even call it corrections, Department of Correction. I don't know how anyone could come
There's
out
a
of that
saying
being a
that
better
goes-
person.
Yeah, there's a saying that goes that you could catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar,
Yes.
right? So if the staff was actually to be nice to the inmates, wouldn't it make their job so much easier to secure them? Like, I would think so. I've been in prison, so I understand that it felt a lot better when a guard called me sir or called me by my name. Something that real basic, real simple.
And did that happen for you?
I've had one or two. I've had one or two, but not overall.
Yeah.
I've also gotten beaten down. I've gotten hit with nightsticks, stuff like that. On Rikers Island itself, I've actually gotten stomped out by more than one guard, simply because I wanted my hour rec. You're supposed to have an hour in the yard, and I wanted my hour rec, and because of that, I was labeled the troublemaker, and I became stomped out, and they beat me up so bad that my whole face looked like the Elephant Man.
Oh my God.
And I was actually only 16 years old. So that was the worst of it too. But the point is that if they was actually nice to you, then it would have made their jobs a lot easier. But yeah, that's an irony that a lot of them don't follow up on.
I totally agree with you. And frankly, I mean, it would their lives, everything would be better. I mean, I wrote about it in the book, the parking lot where we parked. I mean, it was like the size of, Shea Stadium, covered in smashed liquor bottles. Their drinking is very, very rampant, which is a sign of great unhappiness. It doesn't work for anyone the way the system is as it runs now. It's no good for the inmates, it's no good for anybody, or for the COs, and I don't think it has to be. There's no reason that Rikers Island has to be hell on earth. There are a lot of ways that this could be humanized, and the more you dehumanize it, the more depraved behavior you're going to get. So I think so many ways they're going in the wrong direction.
So even though it may occur one day, that you have that inmate that you met in there that will come out and say thank you. I've never met you in there. I was actually an inmate, but I never met you in there. So on behalf of all the people that you actually helped, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to the show
I'm
and
very
actually
touched.
talking about your story.
Yes.
So tell them one more time where they could get in contact with you, so they could also find out more about your book too.
MaryBuser.com. And the book is locked down on Rikers. You can find it on Amazon, or if you Google it, you'll find me.
Right.
And I'm very accessible. I'm always happy to talk to people.
So thank you so much for coming to the show. So with that, I'm going to sign off the way I always sign off and say never, ever, ever be silent. We'll talk back right here on Backtalk with Cripple3030. Thank you.
Because
Okay.
a lot of people I meet, I tell them I just came home from doing 31 years.
Right.
They can't believe it.
Right. They
31 years.
don't see it.
They don't see it.
Gotcha.
Because my swag is still my swag.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
It is what it is. You know what I mean? So I know. Then I came home in front of 8-ball. I wasn't behind 8-ball. I was in front of 8-ball. So that kind of like helped me transition too.
Okay.
You know? 'Cause I always had things set up already if I got here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Networking and stuff like that.
So now what you up to now?
Right now, they're doing a documentary with me.
Okay.
To the flag with liberty and justice. Yes, we're finally broadcasting. There we go. Hello, everybody. Well, let me set my clock because I only got 10 minutes for this. I done infiltrated BronxNet, cut off their show and airtime, but I don't have enough signal to kill it for too long. Anyway, So I know you was probably watching Backtalk with Cripple3030. Some of my people that I know from the underground. Congratulations to him on his show. But I've interrupted you now. Caught your dial for a little while, if you would say. They call me the studio bug. I'm that virus that was formed in the midst of the street. And I'm from BX Records. We represent that underground music and all that's from our world of the art and entertainment field. But I was catching a show with Mary Busey, who was speaking about the many abuses that was coming out of Rikers Island. Am I the only one that caught that? Her name is Busey, and she's talking about abuse. Actually, it's Mary E. Buse. Yeah, and she's talking about abuse. Isn't that ironic that she's fighting against abuse? I wonder if that's just a pen name to get things up. But yeah, she was talking about the abuses over at Rikers Island and the correction facility and what she saw. And can you imagine that somebody got their arm twisted to the point where it's numb? I know out there is like its own little separate society over there, and you know, us here, we kind of throw people to the side if they've done anything that's kind of wrong. But one thing that she said that caught me is a very important element to us as human beings. It's the element of decency. Decency. Perfect word, right? Matter of fact, let's just look it up and see what it says. Decency. The behavior that conforms to acceptable standards of morality or respectability. Requirements of acceptable or respectable behavior. Yeah, I think that that is something that's kind of a little bit lost in our society. And another thing I've always said this, I've always said that Generation X was always going to be a defining point in history. A defining point where, because, you know, X is that great variable number, so you never know if things in society is going to go left or things are going to go right, because every generation kind of takes control of like the world and this platform and possibly even the temperature of everything for a couple of at least for a decade or a couple of decades of rule, as they would say. And I think what's very important of what we do now is going to bring us left to right. And I think that where we are as far as human decency is not where we were in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, or even in the 80s. I think, like, when was the last time, I know this is New York, so we don't get around to do this all a lot. But let me ask you this question. When was the last time you've actually done something nice for someone? A neighbor, maybe. Matter of fact, if you live in a building, do you even know all of your neighbors on your own floor? Do you speak to your neighbors? How often do you even do that? That's a good question. Like, when's the last time you've actually done anything nice for them, just out the blue? You know, we're in this Thanksgiving type season, and we all could use a little bit of decency, a little bit of heart in our movements. And actually, speaking of the word heart, that's what we need to work on too. Our souls, our inner beings, because it doesn't really take that much to be nice to somebody, but we don't always have to have that kind of hard hard like cement facade about ourselves, you know, one of those type of elements. And yeah, it's like that little I don't know if y'all went to church, you know, this little light of mine, don't let it, you know, take out a little candle, blah blah. Y'all know the song. If you don't, look it up or ask somebody who has gone to church about the daggone song. But our hearts, that's a key thing. We got to work on that element. We don't want it to be, we don't want to lose our hearts, our minds, and our souls. We want to keep that decency. So we don't want them to become cold. Which reminds me of a song. You already know I'm ready from the underground SBs from the music world. So I have a song that would describe that same thing, that same type of feeling of not losing your inner soul. I'm going to play it for you guys. I hope you enjoy it. We'll work on that element. And we're about to be out here in a few minutes. But enjoy this song there. And I'll let you guys get back to 3030 and back talk. I guess I was the one giving you back talk, like I said today. Catch you later, guys.